Are we now in the live environment? Hi, everybody. Welcome to Funding and Procurement. Now, on today's panel, we have Stephen Mooring, Gail Rowe, Dan McCrory, and Peter MacDonald. So I'd like to start by just giving a little bit of an intro. Stephen, would you like to go first?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So my name's Stephen Mooring. I'm Head of Sustainability at Central Bedfordshire Council. I've been heading up the council's array of projects linking into sort of decarbonisation, active travel, sustainable transport, of which electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging infrastructure is one that's come to me. We've probably been seriously looking at electric vehicle charging points for about a year and a half. We were quite slow behind in coming to get moving on this. We've had working with a charge point provider since February. So we have a kind of sort of approach that's somewhere between kind of a public-private sort of partnership type approach, where we're looking to sort of make use of funding like orgs, for example, but also looking at fully funded opportunities. An awful lot of learning over the last year, and happy to kind of share some of my learning. I don't have all the answers, but it'll be interesting to hear what other people have to say as well.
Collectively, we will.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Stephen. If I could move across to Peter next for a quick intro. Thank you, Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter MacDonald from Croydon in South London. We're an outer London borough that stretches from Crystal Palace down almost to the M25 and serve terraces of back-to-back housing and through to suburbs and fields, so very different charging requirements. The borough has about 100 commercial charging bays, and we've got about 350 council bays now. Installed the first points over a decade ago in a cross-borough procurement, helped by Transport for London. Over the subsequent years, we kind of grew slowly. We've got about 40 lamp column bollard charging points, a dozen rapids on the main TfL roads, and a number of other operators, including over 200 bays with Liberty Charge.
Wonderful. I like the ending of that. Very apt. Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter. Now, if I could just go to Dan again for a quick intro. Thank you, Dan.
Good afternoon, everybody. Dan McCrory, Principal Transport Planner at Hammersmith and Fulham. I've been involved with EV delivery for about 8 years now. Primarily in Hammersmith, but also with a few other London boroughs as well in a previous role. We've got quite a mix of charge points in Hammersmith and Fulham, right from lamp columns where we've got over 1,000, your destination fast chargers where we've got over 250, through to rapids and ultra rapids just recently installed in a petrol station down in Fulham. So yeah, hopefully I can bring something to the table today and offer some insights through my experience.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Gail Rowe, if you'd like to give a little intro. Thank you. Oh, we're having some sound difficulties. Can everybody hear Gail? Sorry. Okay. So while Gail is sorting that out, hopefully I can do her justice. So yeah, Gail has worked within the local authority space for almost as long as Dan, but it's rude to give a lady's age away. And she's one of our pinnacle town planners within our company. So she's helped deliver many projects. Oh, I think we're back. Gail?
Do you need this?
Sorry, I needed this room.
Yeah, that's okay.
Apologies, Peter.
No, that's all right.
I have a meeting. This is director's room. And,
Yeah.
I don't give you full rank, but on this one I do because I have.
No, that's.
Well, Peter's sorting himself. Gail, are you able to? Can we hear you yet? You might need to go into your settings on the bottom of the screen and click microphone and pick the right one. Okay, we're okay. We will get through. So I've introduced Gail now. I'm Rachel Lenton, as my name badge there shows. So I'm the sales director here at Liberty Charge. We've recently expanded and grown out our team to meet the demand of the market, and we're very keen to help our customers, past, present and future, and try to navigate through the often confusing world of funding and procurement. So what are the options? So we know there's a range available. There's fully funded, heavily public funded. Now, heavily public funding was more common at the start, as the market was very new. There weren't many EVs on the road. It was more of an enabler, but it was never meant to be commercially viable. So as the market evolves, we have private businesses where we're able to part fund and deliver some sites, principally rapid charges in prime locations, as they're the most commercially viable charging model, or part funding of a fast charger deployment, which you'll have seen, especially around the London boroughs. But as the scale of EV charging is growing exponentially, what needs to be delivered now is a viable network, and it needs to be able to attract private sector money, because as we all know, utilisation will increase exponentially. But right now, we do need to plan for the future and make it as commercially viable as possible. So public funding will only get you so far, and it has a lot of completing requirements for what is available, such as health. Where do you spend your money? Do you spend it on transport? Do you spend it on education, defence? There's a lot of key areas for public money to be positioned. So when we look at funding for EVs, we have got broadly three models. So I'll just squiz through these very quickly. Own and operate. I think we all know what these are, but as an example, Charge Place Scotland, entirely public funded, achieving good coverage, but is now hitting the limits of what it can achieve. And they now recognise they need private sector investment to achieve a sustainable model. So sustainable, as we all know, has a very broad context. Sustainable in terms of the use of energy, in terms of how they're installed, but also being viable enough to last, and in that case, sustainable. We've also got public and private partnerships, which is a predominant model at the moment. So you have a mix of public funding, as you mentioned earlier, AUX, and there's also LEVI, with a charge point operator or the LA paying the rest. It's typically a concession model, and it can work well. Then we look to fully funded, and we've got some examples such as the Northants rollout that they've had recently, where the charge point operator pays for everything, takes on the utilisation risk, as I touched on earlier, and we're effectively leasing space from the council for an agreed period of time on the basis that we can recoup the investment over the life of the contract. This model's typically applied already for rapid charges, as they're more easily commercially viable. So we help the local authorities decide where to put the charge points, and we fund it. So we take some of the pressure away from the local authority. But I'd be very interested to hear, perhaps from Dan, which model is most enticing to you now if you were to begin another deployment?
Well, okay, so yeah, I mean, Hammersmith and Fulham have actually we've delivered through a variety of models. Primarily, it was option 2, the public and private partnership, and that's something that we realised that we needed to build on in order to sort of find that 25% match funding, which is so critical for the AUX grants. We're at a stage now that that the network is relatively developed. We've accessed, I'd say, a lot of the grant funding that we can. So it is the fully funded models that we're seeking to utilise, particularly with rapids deployments, which seems to be most favourable with the commercial operators.
Oh, could I ask that if people aren't talking, if you could just put yourself on mute slightly, because I can definitely hear some background noise. I'm not sure if that's...
Apologies, I think that was me, because I'm actually...
No, I didn't know if it was you or not, so I do apologise. Gail, are you able to?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, wonderful, thank you. I didn't want to miss you out. If I could ask you to do your quick introduction and then give us your thoughts really on the available public models.
Yeah, so
and
thanks
private
for that.
funding.
So as you mentioned, I've been working in this space for a good couple of years. I've been with Liberty Child for just over 2.5 years, and that's enabled us to demonstrate our model through the Innovate UK funded programme VPAC, where we worked with Croydon, Wandsworth, Hammersmith and Fulham, and a number of local authorities. So we've got a really good insight in terms of how this actually works. One of the big things that we do is look at the whole procurement process. It's complex, it's not straightforward, but actually we align our model to what suits the local authority. So if they are able to provide a direct award, that's great, and we can work with the local authority. If they need to go through a more complex structured process, again, we work with local authorities through those procurement processes. My background's local government. I've supported local businesses access public sector contracts, so I understand that the process isn't straightforward, but actually what local authorities try to do is to streamline the processes as easy as possible. So you're supporting local businesses and also ensuring that you've got good quality services that are being delivered, not for the short term, but also that you're making sure that once you've onboarded a contractor, that you've got decent levels of service going on up and beyond the kind of initial deployment. So you've got good levels of proactive and reactive maintenance. Thanks.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's a very well-rounded summary there. Thank you. I would just like to point the audience to the ask your question icon on the bottom of the screen. We will also be dropping in a few live polls as well, which should pop up for you to answer. I will let you know when they're on there, but we're very keen to get your input as well. So if I could jump to Peter, what are your thoughts on the topic today?
Okay, so in Croydon, I guess we've had some of the benefits or the downsides as well of being in London and having a number of London-wide schemes and funding and frameworks. So in terms of what I would do next, is we are looking very much more towards the private or commercial funding, but there are still government grants available, and that does help boost the numbers, but also it helps give the council some control and also ensure that if there are, say, locations where that might be less commercially viable, you can still be sure to put those charging points in. The downside of the grants is that they may have restrictions on what you can do, so do have a look at that carefully. And it's some mix that is going to work. You may have council money of your own or planning section 106 money. So we have some of that where particularly where residential development has required a car club, but they've not provided that on site. I have then taken money to put that on the street, plus a bit of cash to ensure there's a charging point. So I actually have some of that money that I will need to spend. So I guess my overall message is that everybody's circumstances will be slightly different. So you do need to look at the whole picture yourself.
I suppose that's as well why these types of webinars are so useful, because you do get a very broad range from people, but you are hearing very similar themes which will resonate. So yeah, some very good points there. Peter, oh no, sorry. Thank you, Peter. Stephen?
I'm kind of hearing some points that resonate with me from Dan and Peter. I think Central Bedfordshire is a kind of very different to the London authorities. We're a predominantly rural area, 6-7 large market towns. So for us, kind of getting that geographic spread is over a larger area is really, really important. And that doesn't necessarily always fit with what the best sort of commercially viable sites are.
You have to make sure there's enough
for
charge
us in terms of absolutely. So for us in terms of kind of using them to encourage people to move to EV and provide the facilities for our residents, doesn't mean we have got some that maybe haven't been in the top 20 locations that I would look at. Also, it means we have huge issues with grid capacity, grid connection costs, and that is a massive limiting factor. And
so how have you found the best way to approach that? Because you say limiting factor, but you don't seem to be someone to be put off that easily.
At the moment, we are just focusing on getting as many out as we can and getting as broad a spread as possible. And so we're lucky that at the moment we're able to put those two difficult ones, but are in good locations to one side. We are talking to UKPN, who are our DNO, with regards to kind of grid upgrades, substation upgrades. We look at other sources of funding we can bring in, how that ties in with development to get that sort of infrastructure.
So are you looking at sort of the fully private funded for some sites, and then a mix of the two for others?
We're probably, well, at the moment, a lot of our work's been looking at making use of funding from AUKUS and things. So it is that kind of public-private partnership. Again, they have their own criteria with regards to what's suitable and what's not. With the kind of what I'd call probably the public sort of network that you'd see in our car parks and things, which would predominantly be rapids. We're looking more at fully funded. But then there are some locations where we know are the right location and a good location, but for whatever reason they might not be considered. So, for example, our leisure centres are really good, but they don't have 24-hour access. So the providers aren't necessarily keen, and there's good reasons they don't have 24-hour access. So it's you get through one barrier and on to the next.
A literal barrier.
Literal barrier.
A literal barrier. Alan Thorley, I see your chat's just come in, and I don't want to miss it, but it's interested to know what is, and I just need a little bit more there so we can answer. I think I know where it came up in the conversation, but if you could jot a note back there, that would be very, very helpful. Thank you. Okay, Gail. Did I miss? I haven't missed anybody out there, have I? I've spoken to Peter, Stephen, and Dan, haven't I? That's okay. Just wanted to make sure. So Gail and I were having a chat recently about what local authorities should be thinking about before the tender. So you're aware of the types of funding that are out there, as we've just spoken about, but what information should you start to gather before you go to tender, soft market, as it might be? So we'll just go through a couple of bullet points, and then Gail, if you could add a bit more context to them from our perspective, then we can put that out to the wider audience. So some of these we already know, but I'm stating them so as to not miss anything out. So be very clear on your aims and objectives. Try not to be too overly prescriptive on your tenders, because as we've discussed today, there's so many, well, I'm using your word, barriers or hurdles, or in the first instance, opportunities that you might not put forwards in your own mind because you might think, oh, that won't work. So if you can be as open as possible, then the partner that you do choose will be able to work with you holistically across your borough to allow space for innovation. You want to try and challenge, try and find that nuance that's really going to help you find the right fit. So I know it's a balance between not being overly prescriptive and challenge, but don't limit yourself, I suppose, is the overall approach. Look to make your tender attractive. So we spoke about commercially viable and sustainable. Luckily, with Liberty Charge, we are a company that does install at scale and at pace. That is sustainable, and that enables you then to have a broader range of coverage for your EV, and in some instances future-proof yourself for the growth of EV uptake. You can perhaps try approaching neighbouring local authorities, and Gail does have a story on that and some work that we've done in adjoining areas who have onboarded a CPO. Review procurement routes, again, as we've spoken about today. There are certain frameworks. We know about them, but I'll just drop one in there. CCS. Do hold market engagement days to ensure the tender spec is deliverable and realistic, vetted against an audience, so you can get insights. And will it be attractive to multiple operators? That will give you the best enduring sustainable solution. And obviously consider funding models. Before we go into that, I'm just going to quickly drop a live poll out, and then while that's going, Gail can add her insights. So the poll I'm about to start, which we can do in the background, is how do you intend to fund your next round of charge points? There we go, that's up. So Gail, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Rachel. So one of the things that I used to do is when a local authority goes out to tender, it's actually, completing that specification, responding to quality questions, responding to the ask of the local authority. And there are two things that I'd say is that some of the tenders are really, really good, very thorough. It's clear that the local authority spent a lot of time and put in a lot of resource in terms of structuring the actual tender. For some local authorities, it's been more challenging from a kind of from a provider, and in terms of some of the quality of the questions, some of the asks, some of the deliverables. But what works really well is when a local authority says, hands up, we don't know what this looks like, and we go out to soft market tender. And that enables a local authority to actually understand what's out there in the market, what are charge point operators prepared to do. So you almost want to kind of like look at it from several different angles. So the first angle is looking at the feasibility. So you might want to do an initial feasibility to support your authority develop a strategy. Where do you actually put the chargers? When do you put the chargers? When do you actually install the chargers? And what type of chargers? So possibly feasibility. One of the things that we do at Liberty Charge is actually work with local authorities to do that feasibilities. So you could actually integrate that as part of your main program. So as part of the main program, you have feasibility, but what you're also looking at is deployment, and you're looking at delivery, but also you're looking at the additional added value. So you're looking at some of the communications. So for instance, in Liberty Charge, we have a solid communications team. We also work with external PR consultants that support us with the work that we do around communications. We also do social value. So part of my role is looking at how we demonstrate the impact that we're having in a local authority. So as well as utilisation, it's also looking at the carbon savings. If it's a significant deployment, what else can we bring? So in terms of upskilling local residents, doing events and other activities to make sure that local residents are aware that charge points are coming. We can also look at local employment and also supporting local supply chains. So there's a number of different things that we can add to support local authorities. So make sure that you're doing soft market testing, but also speak to other local authorities that are deployed charge point infrastructure. And the value of having Dan and also Peter is the fact that they know what this looks like. They know what the pain points are, and they know what the kind of internal governance processes are. So Dan and Peter, I'm putting you on the spot here. But,
we also have a few questions coming in as well. So we can really put them on the spot.
Yeah, so Dan and Peter, what I've done with Dan and Peter is say, you know what, we have the experts here. We have local authorities that have deployed, speak to these local authorities and find out what they went through so that can inform your tender specification. So do a soft market tender, speak to other local authorities, but also one of the things you might want to look at are existing frameworks. So for instance, Oxford City Council have got a really nice framework that other local authorities can use so that you don't have the pain of actually coming up with all of the documentation and going through all of the processes. Oxford City Council have provided all of the documentation, which means it's easy. You can use existing templates.
That's a very,
and it's compliant.
Yeah, very valid point. I just want to jump on to you did a lovely segue there, Gail. So thank you. So that's Annette Osborne's note from about 5 minutes ago. Now, the question I was talking about earlier from Alan, where he had begun his question, he's now come back with the full question. So I'll ask it to the panel in a second. So Alan is interested to know how to approach this from a parish council perspective, a village of circa 5,000 people. Are CPOs interested in this sort of small scale project, or do we need to go through the county council? Now, already the answer is yes, from my perspective, because we are already talking to quite a few. But I'll quickly open that out as what you might not have, but do you have much sort of back and forth conversations with any of the parishes within your councils, your boroughs? It's an open question.
So we involved all our town and parish councils as best we can. So and taken on a little bit of a coordination role, effectively providing that liaison point, recognizing that town and parish councils are, no two are the same and they all have different levels of expertise. So on a very basic level, we've asked them to put sites forward that we would include in our sort of long list of sites that we look at, ranging to we will just do the introductions for you. I think Surrey have done a lot of awful good work. Surrey County have done an awful lot of good work with their parish councils and
to bring everybody on board.
Particularly using things like Orcs and stuff and using both sort of parish community centres and things as a focal point for that sort of community charging.
Perfect. I just want to again point the audience to the poll, the first poll that we've done. It's I'll just read the highlights because we can share towards the end. But so far, 32% of you have said a mix of public funding and charge point operator investment. And again, the topic was how do you intend to fund your next round of charge points? And then the next highest was not sure yet, followed by a combination of the above. Be interesting to see if those 26% of you will have changed your mind towards the end of today. I'll just load the next poll, which is what delivery routes are you most likely to take? So Peter and Dan, do you have any points on the question raised there about parish councils? Are you very much aligned?
Yeah, I think my mining point would be that I think, collaboration on sort of frameworks and procurement is going to make it easier for everyone. So, if you can be in touch at a county level, then it's going to make everyone's lives easier in the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd give the same sort of general point of view, just a couple of thoughts, and it's a very general one as well. Do you know what the demand is in your location? Are there electric charging, electric cars already? Because that would also give a sense of how big that is. 5,000 households or whatever doesn't sound very large. Another little practical thing, just look on somewhere like ZapMap and see which charge point operators are operating in your vicinity. I would imagine that is the county council in some form or other, but check it out.
Yeah, perfect. So we've got a question from James Bell here. So I'll read it out. How are the panels seeing the use of existing street assets being funded, i.e. street lights through telecom networks? And are they able to plug the gap in those areas which aren't commercially viable? So I think what he's saying there is street lights are being used as lump post charging because those areas aren't seen as being commercially viable. But do you think that's a good fit? Is what I think James is saying. If it isn't, James, shout up and I will get back on track with that. So if I can open that up, maybe to Dan first.
Yeah, sure. Well, I suppose, I mean, what I'm understanding from the question is that can the sort of the cheaper, slower charge points fill a gap? And I suppose the simple answer is yes. Whether it's going to cater for the need is a different point, I suppose. But
James might ask that question in a second. Well, let's wait.
Yeah. Any charge point is better than no charge point if a charge point is needed.
Yeah. Yeah, fully. So have you challenged back to any of your charge point operators previously where you've seen an area, but you know it's not commercially viable, but there is definite resident demand?
Well, again, I mean, it's it's slightly different set of circumstances in sort of inner London. We're in zone 2, we're almost 100% urban. We've got high percentage of residents that don't have off-street parking. There's high percentage of residents that own vehicles. So there's very few areas of Hammersmith and Fulham that have been deemed, not commercially viable. Yeah,
at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that question asked there. So Alistair Young, now this is a question for Peter and Dan. In your contracts, where have you mobilised private capital to work alongside AUX funding, and who sets the tariffs for the charge points? So again, in your contracts, where you have mobilised private capital to work alongside AUX funding, who has set the tariffs for your charge points?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this. Yeah, so the tariffs are set within the terms of the concession contract and they're negotiated between both parties. So whilst, we have a fixed pay-as-you-go sort of price on a lot of the concession contracts that we've awarded through AUX, what we have seen recently due to the energy crisis and the rise in energy costs, there have been some requests for variations to those contracts to allow the operators to remain viable.
Yeah. Do you have anything
just to add from Croydon, because we've used the London Cultural City framework for quite a few of our charging points, the sort of tariff setting has been within that. So I wouldn't necessarily have that privilege in the future, but certainly when you are procuring, do make sure you've got an agreed process for how the tariffs are going to be set and how they will change. Having said that, what I've observed to date is that the market is still sufficiently competitive that in the end prices have tended towards a norm, so that there is value in having some variation in the charge point operators in your area.
You do raise a very good point there, Peter, because we need to be commercially viable in order to get a return on our investment. So that in itself self-regulates to a degree. Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, a message from Claire Tag here. We are a rural parish in Cornwall with parking issues. We want to know what our options are. Now, this obviously links in similarly to the question earlier, so we might just want to group that together with what we've spoken about today. But are there any extra points you might want to offer to Claire on that note, other than what we've not covered off today? I think it's talk to your county council, reach out to charge
Talk
point
to your county
operators.
council, and if you've got
Yeah.
high parking stress, then the chances are a lot of those vehicles are soon going to be EV, so you've got lots of options.
Yeah, there you go. We will provide a bit more detail on that for you later, Claire. Thank you. Now, Roger Selvin has said, can you explain what you mean by soft tendering? Now, I could begin to explain this, but I know Gail would love to take this question, so I'll pass it across to Gail.
Okay, so it's a non-competitive process. So it is an opportunity for you to go to the market and say to the market, this is what we're interested in. We're interested in a contract of, say, 15 to 20 years. Would you be interested in that? And we'd say definitely. If the contract length was less than 10 years, would you be interested in this contract opportunity? And we say no. So it's an opportunity for charge point operators and other providers within this space to put forward responses to questions from local authorities, knowing that they're not going to be locked in to a commercial arrangement. So it's not a formal contract, it's just a way of testing the market, finding out what the market are interested in, and for you to base your tender based on those market responses. So it's all part of the kind of opportunity to shape the market based on what's out there in the market.
Yeah.
So for instance, as I said, as a charge point operator, if a contract is less than 15 years, it's not attractive for a number of different reasons. And the point that you've made, Rachel, is the fact that commercially it's not viable for us. So it's going to the market with a set of questions, with a set of asks, finding out whether or not the market's interested, and using this information to actually then shape your full market tender.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And whilst Gail was summarising that, I've just dropped in the next poll question. Already had an answer. To recap on the last one, which was what delivery routes are you most likely to take? 41% not sure yet. So I suppose talking about the soft market tender was very apt in that regard, because that can help you shape your ideas or firm your understanding. So 22% is utilise a procurement portal, dynamic purchasing systems such as CCS, but there are others. And then mini competition amongst a number of shortlisted suppliers. We are happy to make your lives as easy as possible. So do feedback. So this poll, which everybody's eagerly going through, is what has currently delayed your plans to go to tender. Awaiting procurement support is swaying slightly. Proposed to use LEVI funds where they've been granted, and lack of political buy-in. Now we do see that you do need a lot of cross-party, cross-cabinet advocates and buy-in from the procurement and legal team. So maybe I'll pop that to Stephen. How did you find getting buy-in at a political level?
I think. Sorry. I think.
No, I was just trying to phrase the question.
Yeah, I think on the political level, I'm lucky we've got very supportive councillors. Sustainability is a priority area, and they see this as being a really key issue. That said, all local authorities, we have the same financial pressures, which have only increased in recent weeks even. So the whole economics of this is really is key, and that's why that kind of supplier funded model, and possibly if there's compromises over location, that's why that's the route we opted to go down. But yeah, so I was lucky. They gave me an easy ride. Probably the one area where there was some nervousness was about contract lengths. Especially I think our councillors operate in sort of 4 or 5 year cycles, and so 15 years is a very long time. And other than maybe some major contracts around leisure and possibly waste collection, we don't tend to get anywhere near that long. So that was a little bit out of their comfort zone.
Okay, yeah. understandable. Do Peter or Dan have any questions on that? Because when I'll jump to the next question otherwise. So did you have constraints internally to get political buy-in across?
Well, yes. So, sort of Croydon famously is currently under Section 114, which is the local authority equivalent of bankruptcy. So where I had strong political support before this May's elections, and we've achieved the targets that we were working towards, getting decisions now for both those political and financial reasons is more difficult. And things like, well, if you're putting in another 1,000 charging points, what does that do to our parking income, for example? All comes up there. I do have good answers to that one. So political change, as well as the financial constraints. But where you can look to charge point operators who are willing to fund in your location, then
makes the ask easier.
You're going to have a net gain. The only thing I would caution is be sure you've got the in-house resources to sort of handle the demand, to take the requests if you're doing that, and just if you're doing EV only bays, sort of handling the traffic orders, all that side as well.
Quickly, Dan, do you want to add anything? We do have a few questions to get through, but I think your input might be quite.
Only thing that I've got to add there is, obviously political buy-in is key to being able to roll out, and wherever we've had any sort of reticence, then having a strong sort of resident being able to demonstrate that evidence that Peter referred to early on, that sort of always sort of helps
Everybody pull in the same direction, doesn't it? As you build out. And we find that as a charge point operator, we really do get to meet a diverse pool within the local authorities, because there's a lot of interested parties in delivering a rollout. So all aligns to the resident need. So Sarah Battersby, our county council is being very slow to get going on EV charge points. We have the option to work with the church to put an EV charging point in the churchyard. We need to know more about, hang on, let me just scroll down. Funding via the parish council, and any remaining costs can be met by the church. What is the best way to get this information? In brackets, then you save interest aren't responding to emails. I'm sorry to hear that, Sarah, but we should be able to point you in the right direction here. Who would like to step in? I know we might have covered some of these notes before, like reaching out to your charge point operators, but Stephen, you put your hand up.
Yeah, I would speak to charge point operators. And see what they can offer. Everyone I've spoken to from a number of different companies are really knowledgeable about how kind of their offer dovetails in with other grant funding. And they'll probably give you a very honest view as to actually whether that is something that is an attractive proposition or stacks up.
It is. We do have these conversations very regularly, so the charge point operator will be able to support you in that journey. And I'm very glad Stephen's also confirmed that. Thank you. I'll just jump onto a couple of these questions. So Mark's asked, the response from Cornwall Council as a rural parish council was to refer to the energy saving trust with the final comment. I hope you make some progress. It was interesting to know. Sorry, guys, I've just got to scroll down. I need a bigger screen. Sorry. I've got a really good thinking face, haven't I, when you see that? So apologies for that. With the final comment, I hope you make some progress. It'd be interesting to hear how you get on. Hardly encouraging at the micro level thoughts. So there seems to be a recurring theme here in where do the I don't want to use smaller because that sounds awful, but where the requirements are limited by the size of the parish, where they can easily go to. I know Peter did talk earlier about talking to the county council as well as your charge point operators. So another question here, in the fully privately funded model, how have these been awarded? So in the fully privately funded model from Emma Glynn, how have these been awarded? A fully regulated concession agreement, grant agreement, in these cash-strapped times, have the panel been successful in securing some income for the LA in the fully funded models? So again, Emma's asking in how have these awards been obtained when local authorities are looking for extra funding models? So is there any room in them getting funding or actually getting another second income from these charge points? And what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, ours have been set up through grant agreements in the first instance. I mean, the next stage would be to go out through with sort of either accessing one of the existing frameworks through CCS, as noted, or there's Oxford Dynamic Purchasing, to look into that.
Yeah.
The degree to what revenue is going to be raised by charge points, I think when charge points first came to market, and there were all sorts of offers available from various suppliers, and it would seem like it was almost a new cash cow for local authorities. I think in recent years, I mean, as operating costs and the reality of the hardware and all the enabling costs have sort of come to the fore, and even utilisation to that extent, I think in reality, local authorities shouldn't be looking at charge point networks as a revenue generation stream. The revenue that you are likely to raise from the network should be thought of in terms of covering the cost by the council, rather than generating profit that can feed into anything else where of significance.
You can understand why that for some from some angles it does seem like it's a revenue stream, because companies are looking to privately fund. So I can understand why it might look in some instances like there's lots of money to be had, but it's purely
I think it needs to be, it's the line of it. It needs to be looked at as a utility, in the same way that sort of new water connections, or connections to power, the national grid. The councils may facilitate that through sort of planning, but there isn't the opportunity to then sort of recoup sort of revenue that's made through that business. Same as petrol stations.
Yeah. Or the old phone boxes. I think that would be nice. Allegory, maybe. So we've got one question here from Peter Milliken, which I'll ask in a minute. I just want to loop back round on this question with the two other gentlemen and Gail. But I've just opened the last poll. It might have already popped up on your screens, but if you could just take a moment and have a look, I'd be ever so grateful. So just a really, really quickly synopsis, because I want to give Peter's question the time it needs. But what are your thoughts on the view that there might be more money to be made as a revenue stream from the charge point?
Just from Croydon, that there is potential, but as Dan has said, don't assume that it's going to be a net gain. And certainly, once you start allowing for any other internal costs, that could well use up the income. So yeah, it is like street lighting. You don't expect to make money out of your street lights, but if you've got the right points in the right numbers at the right time in the right place with the right operator, then there's a good chance of a net gain. And some of the rapid charging points, if you have council land for a rapid hub, then you may well make money. Equally, I've done some of the sums, and over 10 or 15 years, it looks really promising, but you can't guarantee it at the moment.
Yeah, and that's the risk that you're protected from, in want of a better word.
Yeah, and then to pick up on Peter Milliken's question at the end here about substations. I mean, there isn't a grant for substations.
There are some DNOs that are trying to be accommodating, but it's not an easy.
Sure, which is why you might have a lovely plan as to what you're going to put where, but the reality on the ground, site by site by site by site, is there power there? If you are putting in a number of rapids, then the chances are that your commercial charge point operator will help fund the cost of that extra power supply.
This is why we have amazing people like Gail within Liberty Charge, because they have such a breadth of knowledge, and they've been her team have been in the industry for, some really great experience, and some also some fresh sort of energy coming straight from university, really. So Gail, could you just give us a little synopsis on how your team would deal with a situation where it looks like you are going to have a substation, and how you weigh up the pros and cons to that, perhaps?
Yeah, so it's just kind of echoing the points that Peter made, which is if we can justify putting in a substation because we're putting in a number of rapids, that's the justification. So one of the things that we do at the start is look at line maps, the kind of like DNO line maps, to see whether or not the infrastructure is available. We then contact the DNO to get more detailed drawings to understand the capacity on the grid. And if the capacity is not there, it's my colleagues in the engineering team that will potentially look at another location within a particular site, so that we're reducing the access to the DNO, so that actually we're reducing the cost of actually providing the infrastructure by reducing the the kind of like length of time or the distance to the actual DNO connection.
Exactly that. So yeah, Peter Milligan. So there is advice and support there to continue the conversation, because it's not. It might be that some sites need a considerable upgrade, but there's more detail to be sort of walked through as part of a wider scaled operation, because you might find that your requirements are actually higher in number for charge points than you assume. So there might be a wider picture maybe to look at. Now, we've only got a few minutes left, I believe, unless someone tells me different. That's all of our questions asked. I'm not saying you can't ask any more, but please do look at the poll. And I think I'll go to Dan first. So where you have gone to tender previously, but a provider was not onboarded, what caused the tender to stall? This is a little not throwaway question, but a little quick question towards the end, and then I'll go around and ask everybody for their summary of today. So when you've gone to tender before, you didn't onboard a provider, what caused the tender to stall? Because I think it's good to have some lessons learnt as well today.
If I'm honest, I haven't actually got experience of that happening. The closest thing that I've got to that is where we had a CPO involved in a VPAC project that we were working with Liberty Charge on, and Statcraft dropped out, but I can't remember the mechanics that sat behind that and the reasons why. But yeah, Liberty Charge being here is testament to that issue being resolved.
If I could bow on a webinar, I would, but it wouldn't. I think it would lose some of its grandiose, wouldn't it? Thank you. So the same question to Stephen. You're all allowed to have either been that well organised or fluked a situation that this has never happened, but it's worth asking. So,
I mean, I could say when we procured our current provider, we had quite a few tender returns, because it's a very competitive marketplace, as I'm sure you know. And probably the big area of difference, and the ones who scored well were the ones who had really cracked the kind of the proactive and reactive maintenance side. That's essentially the area that gives me and my councillors and members the most grief, from residents saying, "Oh, that charge point's broken again. Can you get it fixed?" That's where the most noise is.
That's such a clear point. Yeah, because you need to know that this is why the fully funded model obviously works, because we need to ensure our revenue. So we can't have a stranded asset or something that's down, and you don't need extra work. You need that partnership collaboration, don't you, to get things moving?
Absolutely.
Bit of self-publicity towards the end. I think no one will mind that. So, Peter, with you in 1 second, but Sarah's just asked a quick question. So if there's any more, please do get them in because I've got a couple of minutes. So Sarah wants to be reminded about the availability of LEVI funding for next year. Now, I know that the first round has completed and the next round won't be looking for as much innovative solutions this time round. So the next round will probably be easier. But Gail, if you'd like to do a talk on that, I know the Energy Savings Trust are very happy to take calls as well.
So just on that, so I think essentially this round of LEVI funds, it's a relatively small part, and that was almost like seen as a demonstration program, just to understand how it might work and the essence and the stories and the evaluations that come out of that first round of funding then informs the larger part. So there's a much more significant part that's going to be available from, I think, April 2023. You know, I was at the Innovate UK showcasing event in Sheffield last week, and one of the kind of like key things that came out of that is the local authorities that did submit LEVI bids, all very, very good quality bids, but it was a demonstration project. They couldn't fund everything, but the quality of the submissions were very high, and the expectation is that most of those applications would get funded in future rounds. But essentially, the bids that were submitted this year were just small demonstration projects to inform the bigger part.
Thank you very much, Gail. That answers the question wonderfully. But Sarah, if you need any more questions, pointers to that, then do shout. There is a quick one that's coming from Glyn Williams. So in Cornwall, I've been there a lot. I'm sorry I said that wrong. Sometimes my dyslexia gets the better of me. In Cornwall, I wrote into the contract financial penalties for the equipment being out of service at any one time. Obviously, we've got things like force majeure and the odd lorry knocking them over, but yeah, that's a point. Have any of you sought to put provisions like that into your tender requirements? Maybe Peter?
I haven't done, but I can see the sense in.
Just double checking.
Yeah.
So I believe you've got 3 minutes left. There's probably a lot more on this topic that we could discuss, but really quickly, if you can all think about your takeaways from today. So perhaps what you thought before was the most valuable bit of information to share with a wider audience, or that may have changed today in lieu of the questions that have come back. So I'll start with Stephen, but again, everybody, if you could just make sure you answer the last question in the live poll, very grateful. So Stephen first.
So I think kind of as Dan and Peter demonstrate, there are a lot of other local authorities who have got a lot of experience in, I'm a big believer in kind of the local government community sort of learning from each other's successes and as well as mistakes. So I think that's one thing. And also actually there's no one option, I don't think. Actually, I think in reality it's going to be a blend of some public funding, some private funded, some grant funding, lamppost charging, rapid charging. I think it's a whole mix of things really.
You need a provider that can have, I suppose, loosely speaking, that's got access to all speeds of charging.
Yeah, and be agile.
Required location. Yeah, exactly that.
And so not just have a single product and say, no, this is what we do, and we can only fit that here.
Yeah, exactly. Because you need a rounded solution, and I say this because I've been involved in many a rollout either on the purchasing side or the selling side, and you need it to happen within the time frames you've allotted because the resource is scarce enough, isn't it? Peter, we've literally got 30 seconds. So Peter and Dan, I do apologise, but you've got a succinct.
Oh, I do one bit of advice. The Energy Saving Trust do have national fora and regular meetings with OZEV and council.
Yeah.
So
And
and talk
talk
to other councils and engage with some charge point operators.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And I'll just follow that with, and understand what's out there. That's soft market tendering, what's realistically achievable for both operator and the local authority.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time today, your valuable input, the slight technical difficulties, which we completely glossed over and no one will ever remember. But yeah, thank you very much for your time. Please do pop through any more questions you have, and Jack and his team will do their magic and make this available later on too. All right. Thank you again, everybody.
Okay. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Vivian.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody, for joining.